Why would a Turkish family choose a high school in London for their child? Would it be okay if family sent their child to London on his or her own? Would it be safe for that child? Is there a specific location in London for best schools? How do students choose the best school, the best match for themselves? How do schools decide which kid goes to which year in high school? Merhabalar, ben Tamer Gürsoy. Tamer Gürsoy ile Yurt Dışında Eğitim kanalıma bir kez daha hoş geldiniz. Bugün size aslında bir değil, 3 videoluk bir dosyayla geldim karşınıza. Çünkü bu bir triloji olacak. Bugünkü konumuz Londra'da eğitim. Londra'daki liselere başvuru. Nasıl başvururuz? İkinci olarak yayınlayacağım art arda birer hafta arayla. Londra'daki liselerin akademik yapısı. Orada ne dersler almanız lazım? Oradaki akademik sistem nedir? Bunlardan bahsediyor olacağız. Üçüncü videomuzda çok güzel başvurdunuz, kabul aldınız ve orada okuyacaksınız. Ama barınma nasıl olacak? Yani yurtta mı kalacaksınız? Bir ev mi kiralayacaksınız? Bir ev mi satın alacaksınız? Ailenizle birlikte mi oraya gideceksiniz? Yoksa tek başınıza bir lise öğrencisi olarak oraya gideceksiniz. Bütün bunlar için kalma fırsatları nelerdir? Barınma fırsatları nelerdir? Bunları konuşuyor olacağız sizinle. Biliyorsunuz ki her ülke ve hatta her şehir beraberinde farklı özellikler de getiriyor. Yani öğrencilerden istediği, talep ettiği şeyler fark edebiliyor. Bugünkü konumuz spesifik olarak Londra ve Londra'da liseler, başta dediğim gibi. Bu konudaki konuğum ise, bu konunun uzmanı şu anda Londra'da karşımızda Leyla Louise Arpacıoğlu. Hello Leyla, how are you?
Hello, I'm very well, thank you. Thank you for having me here today.
Oh, it's great to see you and great to have you in my program. And thank you for your contribution to my channel. The first question I would like to ask you is, why would a Turkish family choose a high school in London for their child? Why would they do such a thing? What will they gain? What will they benefit from a high school in London?
Well, firstly, London is home to world-class universities and schools, and it has long been associated with some of the top institutions in the world. So you know that your child is going to get one of the best educations possible, which is going to help them with their career aspirations. And in addition to that, London is extremely multicultural. There's over 200,000 Turkish people in London, and there's over 600,000 international students. So, as well as networking with British students, they're also going to be networking with elite students from across the world as well.
Well, these are enough reasons to choose London for a high school education, I guess. But then there's this question in mind. Would it be okay if a family sent their child to London on his or her own? Would it be safe for that child? And also, another question is, are there a lot of families who move to London as a family with their child for their child's education?
There is. So, London, like any city, it has its problems, but all of the schools are extremely safe institutions in grounds and buildings where your child is going to be looked after. So many families come to London and they will have their child at a day school, and also the option is for a child to come over and to board as well. And in London, mental health is taken extremely seriously, and teachers are looking after the well-being of children, especially when they're boarding as well. They would have a house mistress who is looking after them, and they would be in a boarding home with children from across different years.
Super. Let's say the family has decided to move to London, but the arrangement they have made is something like this. The father comes to London every, say, Thursday evening, and then comes back to Istanbul, say, Sunday evening, because I know there are people who do that. And the mother is with the kid or with the kids throughout the weekdays. What would a single mother, in that respect, do in London? Would she be bored to death, or would she find things to do? Would she find friends?
Absolutely. You definitely can't be bored in London. And as I mentioned before, there are a lot of Turkish families in London. I'm half Turkish myself. And so my stepmother was in this position whilst my two younger sisters were at boarding school. And so I know there are large WhatsApp groups of Turkish mothers, one specifically for mothers with teenagers, and that has over 400 members. So there's a real community between Turkish mothers. And you also have so many things to do in London, such as book clubs, classes like pottery, you have yoga communities, and then, of course, you've got access to museums, galleries, every type of restaurant you can possibly imagine. And there's definitely opportunities for mums to connect together as well.
Wow. I mean, about those WhatsApp groups and all, women can really get organized, can't they?
Absolutely, get advice. They can join the WhatsApp groups before they come to London and get themselves prepared.
Leila, is there a specific location in London for best schools?
No, there isn't. There's over 100 independent schools in London, and they are all over London. And therefore it's the best option is to choose where you want to live, but to bear in mind the commute to the schools. So, for example, there's certain schools that will only allow children to commute up to an hour, and that's for their mental health and well-being. And so that needs to be considered if the child is going to a day school. And there's lots of pockets of Turkish communities across London. There's some popular areas, North London, Battersea, Richmond, and all of these locations are within easy access to the schools. Families might also want to consider the transport from airports as well if students are boarding and they'll be traveling back to Turkey regularly.
Well, here comes the big question. How do families choose the best fit school for their children? Or, in that respect, how do students choose the best school, the best match for themselves?
Yeah, that's a really important question. And at HBA London, we think the number one priority is understanding the character of the student and where they're going to perform best, because ultimately they will perform best in an environment where they're happy, where they're with students that they get along with, and they're an environment that suits their character. So, really understanding exactly what your child needs is really important. And then also the character of the school as well. We have traditional schools, more modern schools, some religious schools. So parents should bear that in mind. And then another important aspect to consider is what curriculum is on offer at those schools. So, do they have GCSEs or IB feeder curriculum? And then later on, schools offer a combination of A levels, IB, and also AP as well. So, depending on what year the student is joining, that could be an important consideration.
Yeah, especially those APs, right?
Yes, exactly.
Especially.
And another thing to consider is the different types of admission processes. So, some entry to schools would require exams, some just interviews. So that's an important thing to consider as well.
I think this is the right time. This would be the right time to ask you what type of schools are there in London as far as high schools are concerned, like private, state, independent, public?
Yes, the terminology can be confusing, but we have two main groups of schools. So the first group is state schools, I believe called devlet in Turkey, and these are run by the government, and they have a slightly different admissions process that usually involves having to live within a certain catchment area. So families would need to be in a certain location to get into those schools. The second group is called private or independent or public schools. They all mean the same thing and they are run
Wait a minute.
independently.
Let's repeat that.
Okay.
What three are the same again, please?
Private, independent, and public schools. They all mean the same thing. They are all independent from the government. I believe you call them özel in Turkey,
Yeah.
and they have different curriculums, different entry processes, and they're able to set those curriculums and entry processes themselves.
Okay. Well, there's also this thing about age in the UK educational system. Age is a very important factor. Now, how do schools decide which kid goes to which year in high school?
Yes, the key difference between Turkey and London is that in Turkey you have grades 1 to 12 with 4 years in high school. And then in London you have years 1 to 13, so that's 5 years in high school. And the year that your child goes into depends on their birth date of the 1st of September of the year that they will be entering. So, as an example, if your child was looking to go into year 9 in 2025, they would need to have a birth date between September 2011 and August 2012, and they would be 13 and then 14 during that year.
I've always found that very interesting. Do you know the reason behind this?
I don't know the reason behind this actually, but I studied in England and that has always been the case.
Okay. Age does play an important role in classifications, though, doesn't it?
It really does. And it's important for parents to consider at what point they want to move their child over to London education because there can be quite a jump between what's studied in school at Turkey in the same year as what's studied in the UK. As an example, we would advise parents, if possible, that it's better to move their child prior to GCSE years, which is prior to year 9. And that's because teenage years can be very difficult for children. They're struggling with puberty, they're becoming their own person. And it's an extremely stressful time with all of the examinations. So it is possible to join later, but we would definitely advise moving before sixth form if possible.
Remember how we listed the özel and the devlet schools, the private and the state schools? Do they have different requirements as özel and devlet schools? And even among the private schools, do they have different requirements for application or acceptance? Or are there set rules for each and every type of school?
So, talking about independent schools, their application processes vary from each school. So, it's very important to check the details of what the application process is, what the entry requirements are, and then what the assessment will be. One important thing to note is that there are different entry points for different schools. So, some schools offer entry points for year 7, year 9, and year 12. As an example, City of London School for Girls only has the year 7 and the year 12 entry points, whereas St Paul's School has all three year 7, year 9, and year 12 entry points. It is possible to join at other points throughout the year, but they are very limited spaces. So this is an important consideration. The entry requirements are also different between schools. Some schools will ask for a certain level of English and an IELTS exam. Some will ask for a certain GPA score. And importantly, as well, they will be considering different aspects from the child's current school. For example, feedback from teachers, but also grades as well.
Okay, well, I mean, so many details, and wow, that blows my mind off. I mean, so much to consider. Uh, but then you are an expert on this. So actually, I was meaning to ask you this question at the beginning of our conversation, but I forgot. So maybe it's time I asked you this question now. What is it that you do? What is your field of expertise, Leila? Can you explain that to our audience so they know who is speaking? As I said, I should have done this way at the back. I mean, at the beginning.
Absolutely, that's fine. So I'm an education consultant at HBA London. So my job is to research all of the different schools, all of the different entry requirements, and then to support families through that application process. And my expertise comes from living, studying in London. I went to one of the top 10 IB schools in the country, just outside of London. And since then, since university, I lived in London for 16 years. So I'm very familiar with the city, I'm very familiar with the schools, and I can support families on the ground. So then working with Halil Bal, who has countless years experience on the education side, we have a really good combination of skills together.
I want to ask you, what would be a typical timeline for the application process for schools, for high schools in London?
So um, all of them vary. This is going to be the same answer for every question because independent schools all have different processes and they have different timelines as well. So typically, families should be looking to apply about 1.5 years in advance of the September that the child starts. Typically, the summer before a student starts school is when you can register your application. And then typically you have exams and interviews in October, November, and then by December, you will have a decision from the school.
But how do the students prepare for application?
So there's really the most important steps that you can follow. Step one is to get good feedback and good grades from your current school. Number two, you really need to have an excellent level of maths and English. So it's recommended that you do lots of exam practice, lots of interview practice. And then again, it's important to check each school's website because they often list reading resources or practice examinations, or they'll give you information on the types of interviews that the student should expect as well.
Okay, speaking specifically about Turkish students, what issues, what difficulties can a Turkish student face during the application and assessment period?
The level of English is the biggest issue because so a student might have very good English as a second language, but the jump from then having to use English as your first language, both in the assessment, the exam, and then studying school, you need to have a very high level of English. You should be able to read literature, you should be able to write extended essays, and you should be able to have the listening skills to understand the discussions in class as well, which can be, very high level within the different subjects.
In your opinion, students who come from Turkey, you think they are more or less prepared for this level?
There are differences within what's taught in different years, um, in specifically maths and English. I'll keep mentioning as they are considered core skills in London. And so really I would suggest that students need to assess themselves against these practice examinations, and then they can really understand, you know, how much they need to improve in order to study in English.
Okay, and you place special emphasis, special importance on English and math. I mean, they're on their levels of English and math. Okay, the student applied for a school in London and he or she got accepted. So, so far, so good. What next? I mean, where does this student stay after school? What are the options?
Yes, so there's a couple of different options. You can be a day student, which means you would attend a school during the day and go home in the evening. And then you have a lot of boarding schools. So students would have the option to be a full-time boarder, which means they would be there over the weekends and have the option to stay during the holidays. Or you have something called flexi boarding, and that means the student can stay at the school during the week, but then would go home at weekends and at holidays as well.
Our third video will comprise a comprehensive file on boarding accommodation and on places for rent and for sale. That will be the content of our third video. So if our audience stays tuned, they will benefit from the third video too. Uh, also,
Make another important point, if that's okay.
sure.
I think families should be aware that the boarding facilities in London might differ from what's expected in Turkey. So, for example, the luxury boarding rooms are very basic, they're very small, and students will often have to share a room as well.
Okay, good that you have mentioned this because some Turkish families here, they really seek their comfort zone wherever they go. So they should know this beforehand because it's a
Yeah.
different culture. If it's a different setup of everything, they should embrace the differences. Somewhere along the conversation, you mentioned that you were half Turkish. Can you tell the audience? I mean, you are a native speaker of English and you are English, right? But where does this being Turkish come from?
Yes. So I'm half English, half Turkish. My father is Turkish and my mother is English. And I speak Turkish very badly, but I am learning and I am trying, hence why the interview has to be in English today. But so I spent a lot of time in Turkey. I'm very familiar with Turkish family, Turkish students, Turkish culture, and I also have the best of both worlds because I have so much experience of living and studying in London. So I think it's an excellent combination to be able to work with and support Turkish families.
Yeah, that's exactly what I wanted to clarify. That's exactly what I wanted our audience to know, that you know both countries very well.
So please don't make me say anything in Turkish. My accent is is
Well,
very
now that
bad.
you've said it, I'm going to ask you to say something in Turkish, please, so the audience know what your English, what your Turkish is like. Come on, say something in Turkish.
Yeah. Merhaba, hoş geldiniz, memnun oldum.
This can't be it, Leila.
Please don't make me say anything else.
I think it's time you did start learning some Turkish.
I do have lessons weekly.
Oh, you do? Okay.
Yes, yeah, I'm studying hard.
Okay, well then, hurry up. Time is
I
running.
will. I know.
Yeah, yeah. Also, you are working for the HBA London office in London. And HBA, tell us what HBA does.
Yeah, HBA London supports students, predominantly Turkish students, with academic coaching, online tutoring, and now the education consultancy service, which includes finding schools, application management, and then also support on the ground so we can support families throughout the academic year with meetings with teachers or reports or any issues the students face. So I live within 1 to 2 hours of most of the schools, so I can be there if anything goes wrong. And we have a team in Istanbul as well. We have a lovely office where school revision camps take place. During the holidays, and we have academic coordinators and an office manager who are organising the tutoring sessions and supporting students with uh, understanding how to study, when to study, what to study. And Hello really is a fantastic person to work with. He has many years' experience in education and he's been supporting students at HBA for a number of years.
I know I've known Halil for quite some time now, and I know him personally. He's a great guy, and he's a great person who thinks about his students 724. And
Absolutely.
yeah,
I've
he
seen him on WhatsApp groups with parents and students, into the early hours of the morning, helping them not to panic or answering questions. He
yeah.
really does care. And actually the way that Halil and I met was he helped my younger sister Darren, who initially hated chemistry. He tutored her with chemistry, he was her academic coach, and now she is studying chemical engineering at Columbia
Wow,
University,
wow,
all thanks to him.
that's impressive. And Halil is a chemistry major, right? I mean, he's
Yes.
a chemist.
Yeah, so he's saying now that my sister might know more chemistry than he does.
Yeah, life. Life is really interesting, and it has so many ways where it connects us in some way or another. And I'm very happy to have been connected with you through this job, through Halil. And you guys are doing a great job in London, I think, because isn't it a great thing to know that there are people like you in London for families who are about to send their kid to London. I mean, it's good to know that there is good help in London. There's good support in London, as opposed to being all alone and left with questions with no answers or
Yeah,
answers
so
which are difficult to get. Leyla Louise Arpacıoğlu, thank you for joining my program, and thank you for all this great information. Thank you for sharing this information with us. I hope to reconnect with you some other time in another video, but the second of the trilogy, as I said, will be with Halil Bal on the academics in high schools in London, and the third video of this trilogy will be on accommodation in London for those families who are there for the education of their children. Thank you once again, Leila.
teşekkür ederim.